The Indian Wars. Tensions between the settlers and the Plains Indians escalated into decades of violence that swept the Indians from most of the West. The conflicts are known as the Indian Wars. The Sand Creek Massacre. In Colorado Territory, a band of Cheyenne raided nearby ranches in 1864. Army officials offered amnesty or forgiveness if they returned to their reservation at Sand Creek. Cheyenne Chief Black Kettle wanted peace. He led his people back. Before dawn on November 29th, Army Colonel John M. Shivington arrived at Sand Creek with about 700 troops. Black Kettle raised an American flag and a white flag as a sign of peace. But Shivington did not want peace. It is simply not possible for Indians to obey or even understand any treaty, he said. To kill them is the only way we will ever have peace in Colorado. Shivington's troops opened fire and killed about 150 people, mostly women, children, and elderly people. After burning the camp to the ground, the troops returned to Denver with scalps, which they displayed to cheering crowds. News of the Sand Creek Massacre outraged many Americans. Congressional investigators condemned Shivington's actions as atrocities, but they did not punish him. Treaties. After the Sand Creek Massacre, enraged Cheyenne stepped up raids. The Sioux did as well. A swelling stream of travelers along the Bozeman Trail were passing through sacred Sioux hunting grounds. The Sioux chief Red Cloud had tried, without success, to negotiate an end to white encroachment in this area. In December 1866, the Sioux attacked a supply wagon train outside newly built Fort Kearny. When a patrol of some 80 soldiers tried to drive off the war party, the Sioux killed the entire group of soldiers. Finally, the government agreed to close the Bozeman Trail. In exchange, officials pressured the Sioux to sign the Second Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1868. The Sioux agreed to live on a reservation along the Missouri River. Meanwhile, U.S. officials forced the Comanche, Kiowa, Cheyenne, and other southern nations to sign the Medicine Lodge Treaty in 1867. Those nations would be moved to reservations in what is now western Oklahoma. Battle of the Little Bighorn. For years, the Lakota Sioux conducted raids against white settlers who had moved into Sioux lands. In response, the U.S. government ordered all Lakota Sioux to return to their reservation by January 31, 1876. They refused. The situation was turned over to the military. About 2,000 Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho gathered near the Little Bighorn River. The leader of the Sioux, Sitting Bull, conducted a ceremonial sundance. He reportedly had a vision of a great victory over soldiers. The brash leader of the U.S. Army troops, Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, predicted victory as well. On June 25, 1876, Custer led his troops into a headlong attack against superior numbers. Custer and his troops were quickly encircled and slaughtered. The Battle of the Little Bighorn was a tremendous victory for the Sioux, but a temporary one. Now, the U.S. government was even more determined to put down the Indian threat to settlers. The Battle of Palo Duro Canyon. In the Texas Panhandle, Colonel Ranald Mackenzie caught Comanches, Kiowas, and Cheyennes preparing a winter encampment in the fall of 1874. He sent in his cavalry. Some Indians fled. Others defended their scattered camps. Then, Mackenzie's men slaughtered more than 1,000 Indian ponies and destroyed all food stores. Starving Comanches, led by Quanah Parker, had no choice but to move onto the reservation in Indian Territory the following spring. The Indian Wars in the southern plains were over. The Ghost Dance. As you read earlier, word spread that a Paiute shaman, Wovoka, had received a powerful vision in 1889. Wovoka declared that the Indian dead would live again. The buffalo would return, and the settlers would leave. Wovoka's vision developed into a religious movement. Known to outsiders as the Ghost Dance, It inspired hope among Native Americans who were suffering terribly. In August 1890, newspapers began suggesting that the ghost dance was a sign of a coming uprising. A small but very vocal group of whites began asking the government for help. In December 1890, the U.S. military ordered the arrest of Sitting Bull, who had joined the ghost dance movement. A skirmish broke out, and Sitting Bull was killed. Many of Sitting Bull's band of Sioux fled west. The weary Sioux surrendered to U.S. troops, who took them to Wounded Knee Creek in modern-day South Dakota to make camp. The Wounded Knee Massacre. The next morning, Colonel James Forsyth of the 7th Cavalry ordered the Sioux to give up their rifles. One young man named Black Coyote did not want to give up his gun, and in his struggle with the soldiers, the gun went off. Instantly, the Sioux and the soldiers began shooting. About half of the Sioux men were killed right away. Women and children fled, but soldiers pursued them. By the end of the fight, about 300 Sioux men, women, and children lay dead. Bodies of women and children were found as far as 3 miles from the camp. The Wounded Knee Massacre shocked many Americans. General Nelson Miles was so outraged that he removed Forsyth from command. Others in the Army did not share Miles' concern, however. 3 officers and 15 enlisted men received the Medal of Honor for their actions. Wounded Knee marked the end of the bloody conflict between the Army and the Plains Indians. Black Elk, a survivor of the massacre, came to realize what the loss truly meant. History's Voices. I did not know then how much was ended. When I look back now from this high hill of my old age, I can still see the butchered women and children, as plain as when I saw them with eyes still young, and I can see that something else died there in the bloody mud, and was buried in the blizzard. A people's dream died there. It was a beautiful dream. From Black Elk Speaks, circa 1932.